What's up, guys? It's Nick here, and welcome back to an episode of my top 100 games list. In the last episode, we did games 20 through 11, and in this episode, we are finally at the finale, being games 10 through 1. Now, these games are very dear to me, and I think are the best games in my opinion, and I've spent countless hours on them, probably beaten them multiple times, and just there's so much good in these games and not too much bad, as there's probably just one bad thing of each game. And so we are finally at the finale. I hope you guys enjoyed this long video series or this long journey, but we're going to be coming to an end here, and without further ado, let's start things off with number 10. Number 10. Now, I don't know why, but I compared this game, number 10, to Celeste, which was number 11, and they're both very similar but also very different. They both have quick respawns, they both have a good story, good music, good characters, and so much more. And they're both games that I constantly come back to from time and time again, and it was really hard for me to decide which one I liked better. But the number 10 spot is Katana Zero. Now, the reason I think this game is just a little bit better than Celeste is mainly because of its story and its alternate routes or alternate decisions that you can make, which kind of change up the story a little bit here and there, which I really enjoyed, as each decision that you made for dialogue could change the outcome or the events of the later on the story. Like where you give your sword to V and then you start the level without your sword, or you go through the secret ending and you be a dick to your therapist and your therapist is the final boss. Crazy stuff like that I absolutely love in this game. And the story is really, really good in this game, as it kept me thinking and thinking, and there's a lot of things that aren't really shown or told throughout the story that makes you kind of fill in the gaps or makes you wonder what is actually happening, as the ending is even said to be in the perspective of the player. To really know what's going on, it's really up to the player's interpretation of what really happens at the end, which is crazy. I'm not going to spoil anything, but it's not that far into the game, as the game is pretty short, and that's really the only thing bad about it. Although it's going to get DLC eventually, don't know when, and it's supposed to be Katana Zero 1.5, as it's pretty much half the game but as free DLC. Don't know when that's coming out, but I'm pretty hyped for it. It is still a really good game, and it also got me into speedrunning because of how short it is. It's a lot of fast-paced action, and I'm able to beat the game now in like 22 minutes, which is crazy, as originally I beat the game in like 3 hours, and then I started the speedrun mode, which I got like 40 minutes, and then I cut that time in half to 22, which is crazy that I'm able to do the game that fast, and I mastered pretty much every level, and I know the most optimal time, the time skips. There's a lot of cool things that you can do in this game. It also unlocks as well. You can unlock different swords that have different unique abilities. Like the knife has shorter range, but you can slice more and it's faster. There's like this gold sword, I think, that has a bit more range and also goes through armor but is slower. There's a rainbow sword that just is for aesthetic use, where it just is rainbow colored. There's a flame sword that can light on fire enemies, as well as like oil cans or whatever, and it kind of changes up the gameplay here and there a little bit to kind of add to the replay value. There's also a hard mode as well, which is also pretty cool, that adds to the replay value as well. The music is also really good in this game, and the gameplay of just slowing down time, deflecting bullets, and kind of just going in crazy and just destroying all these enemies and destroying the entire room full of enemies and just going through fast speed, and it's just an amazing experience, honestly. And you feel so badass, and similar to Pistol Whip, you feel like you're John Wick. Like you're going through these action scenes, you're destroying the bad guys, you're deflecting bullets, you're doing these crazy moves, and then you're able to just clear out the entire area full of enemies, and you just feel badass. And sure, it takes some time to kind of understand the situation you're in, understand the optimal route of killing the enemies, the fastest way to kill all the enemies, and all that stuff. But once you learn that, and once you like find the best route and the best optimal way to kill your enemies, it's so satisfying and it's so fun to just speedrun the game and try and get a higher and higher or lower and lower time. And there's even the speedrun mode in the game, which is also really cool. It shows you your split times and everything like that, and how fast you did this level, how fast you did this level, how many deaths you got in this level. It even ranks you too, which is also really cool. Overall though, Katana Zero, really fun game that I come back to constantly, as I love speedrunning it, I love playing it. Story was really fascinating and it kept me wanting to play more. And as I originally played this game on stream, and then I was like, I'm gonna play this game off stream because I keep wanting to play more and I don't want to waste time making up a stream. So I'm just gonna play it on my own time, and I played from like where I ended on the stream to the end of the game, as it was just so good. Story was so interesting, and I just absolutely loved it from start to finish. The only bad thing is that it was short, and that's why it's at number 10. Number 9. Now this is probably the game that I spent the most time on, and it's probably my favorite game, as it is the game that I spent the most time on, being over I think 600 hours on this game, as I absolutely just love playing it again and again and again. And it really got me into competitive gaming, as I wasn't really a big fan of competing in games or esports or multiplayer games in general. As you guys would see through this top 100, there aren't that many multiplayer games. But one of my favorite multiplayer games that I come back to constantly and just absolutely loved, as you guys heard before, 600 hours is a lot of time spent in this game, and that game is Splatoon 2. Now Splatoon 2 is the sequel to Splatoon 1, and Splatoon 1 I didn't spend as much hours into the game. I really loved that game, but I wasn't really as competitive, and I didn't really find the multiplayer as enjoyable and as competitive as I did in Splatoon 2. Although I still really liked it and I spent a lot of hours in it, I didn't spend as much hours as I did in Splatoon 2, and I don't really know why. I think it might have been just the Switch's portability that I was able to play a bit more, as well as just the X rank and trying to grind my way up to X rank, because I thought that was a really cool rank to get. I don't know, and you also get to see what your ranking is in general, as once you get to X rank, you're able to see every month where you're ranked for each mode in the ranked modes, what placement you are in the world, which is really cool, and I love seeing that. But Splatoon 2 isn't really all about the multiplayer, as the campaign is also really good, and the DLC of the campaign is also really good, being the Octo expansion, both of which are really fun, really show you how to play the game, shows you the different classes, and is a really good way of showing you how to play and how to play in different styles, as even the Octo expansion kind of restricted you from doing certain things, and you had to rely on what you had, which is really cool. Like, you had to rely on sub weapons sometimes, you had to rely on your main weapon, you had to rely on your ink capacity. Stuff like that made the game really cool of the single player, to kind of prepare you for the multiplayer and really appreciate everything in your disposal pretty much, which I didn't really learn too much, as I didn't really use sub weapons as much, and I didn't really use my gear abilities, which isn't really something that they teach you in the campaign. But I was really obsessed with the multiplayer, as majority of the time in my 600 hours was the multiplayer, as once you do the campaign, all that's really left is the multiplayer. But there's also the Salmon Run, which was also multiplayer as well, and was a really fun mode, which is like a zombie mode type of thing, where you can get certain unlocks, where you can get certain gear and stuff like that, which was pretty cool. And the updates as well made things fresh. Also the Splatfest made things fresh as well, made you constantly come back, and you guys could even see in my YouTube videos, I love the updates, and I would do a video on the updates every time there's a new weapon, new map, new mode, new Salmon Run map. It was a lot of fun. And even the Splatfest as well, there were new stages, or there was a certain new stage for each Splatfest, which was later on available for private matches in the 5.0 update, which is really cool, as there was I think 24 new stages, as there was 24 Splatfest, and so you were able to use those new stages in private battles later on. And it was really cool how they had that in Splatoon 2, where it made you want to play the Splatfest, as there were new stages that were introduced in those Splatfests, which was really cool. And the Splatfest in general were a lot of fun, as I love the different themes and stuff. they weren't as cool as Splatoon 1, like where Splatoon 1 had like SpongeBob versus Patrick, or Pokemon Blue versus Pokemon Red, or Decepticons versus the Autobots, or Michelangelo versus Donatello, or stuff like that. There weren't as many, I guess, sponsored ones. There was one for like Mario, which was like Superstar versus Super Mushroom, which was kind of cool, and that was towards the end of Splatoon 2's life cycle. But there wasn't really as much branded Splatfest as Splatoon 1 had. But overall, honestly, Splatoon 2 is so unique as well, having this unique music where it's like Inkling rap or like Inkling talking that are just put into music somehow. Don't really know how, but it's honestly so amazing, and I love the music in this game. The art style is also really cool. You have like the squids, the octolings, the Inklings and the octolings. You have just like the ink in general. It looks very good on the Switch, and the visuals overall are just really good on the Switch, especially like the Octo expansion going down the subway. It's very beautiful and very mesmerizing, especially like those levels where like there's a GameCube in the background, or like random like cassette tapes and stuff like that, which is really just atmospheric and very unique from other games. And I'm pretty hyped for Splatoon 3 when that comes out. The only bad thing is about this game that isn't really a bad thing about the game itself. It's really Nintendo, as later on Nintendo charged for their online, which made me not play the game as much, as well as Nintendo Online's not the best, as I did have a lot of disconnect issues, as well as the Nintendo environment, as Nintendo didn't really host too many tournaments for this game, and there wasn't really an esports kind of scene for this game, as Nintendo really didn't push that, and it kind of fell down. And also Nintendo like would cancel, or I think it was something with like Slippy where they would like cancel I think either the teams, or I think they maybe even canceled the tournament because like people had like usernames like Free Slippy, and just Nintendo in general kind of ruined Splatoon 2 a little bit. But it's not really the game's fault. It's really Nintendo's fault that made the game a little bit bad, but it wasn't really bad to the part where I didn't like playing it. It was bad to the part of just the scene of Splatoon 2 that Nintendo kind of put onto the game. But the game in general is really, really good. It's just really Nintendo that made the game a little bit worse than it would have, or it should have been, or would have been. And so, yeah, why it gets number 9. Number 8. Now, originally this game was actually number 1 as my best game, and I thought it was the best game in 2017 when I made my top 100 games list version 1, as I just had so much enjoyment from this game, and I really just thought it was so unique and so much different than other games, and was just an overall really good game that didn't really have anything wrong with it. And over time, when I played more games and I discovered new games and new games came out, my opinions kind of changed a little bit, as well as I thought the newer games that I played were a bit better. This game is still really, really good, and getting number 8 is really, really good. And number 8 is Mother 3. Now, it's a real shame that not too many people know or even played Mother 3, as it's a game that never got released outside of Japan, for reasons I don't really know why, as Mother 1 got released outside of Japan recently on the Wii U Virtual Console back in I think 2015 or something like that. Mother 3 still has not been released outside Japan. And the only way to play this game is through emulation and an English translation brought to you by the fans. And it's really the only way to properly play the game. And so because of that, not many people know or even played Mother 3 because of that fact. And it's sad to say, because Mother 3 is one of the best games of all time, as it has an amazing soundtrack, amazing story, yet very dark story, still a really good story, amazing characters / character development, especially Lucas. Gameplay is also really good, especially mid to late game, and the pacing is overall good, except for I guess the start is a little bit slow, as you get a different main character every time, chapter 1 being Flint, and once you get used to Flint, you pretty much go to Duster, and then once you go to Duster, you can start getting used to like his steep tools as well as Kumataro's PSI. You then scrap all of that and you go to Salsa, which Salsa plays completely different. You have to rely on his animal abuser Facade to attack enemies, and then once you get the hang of that, you go to Lucas on chapter 4, where the main game really starts, and you have to get used to his PSI. But once you get used to all of his stuff, you get to develop that more, and you get to see Kumatara and Duster come back in, and Boney, which Boney is a little bit similar to Salsa, but not really. And you do get to see Salsa later on, and it's really just the time skip as well out from chapter 3 to chapter 4 that makes this game also really good, as you get to see how these characters change from, I think it's like 4 years or something like that, and you get to see how they change, you get to see where they are now, you get to see how they're doing, what they're up to, and it's kind of crazy as the whole town even changes as well from the first 3 chapters to chapter 4, as the town didn't even know what currency was in chapters 1 through 3. And then chapter 4 get introduced to currency, and they kind of get greedy here and there, and they get civilized. And it's kind of crazy how that works, and yet it works really well. And the characters, like I said, Lucas, Kumatara, Duster, Salsa, Boney, Facade, which is a pretty interesting villain, as well as Porky, also a really good villain, as he's very hateable, and I really think that's a good villain. Overall, Joe, it's a really good game. Music is also really good, as the music has a pretty big role in the gameplay as well, as it's very unique where you, when you attack the enemy, if you attack the enemy and press the A button in the beat of the music, you can actually get a combo and deal even more damage, and I think it lasts forever until you mess up the rhythm, which is really cool, and I really enjoyed that. Although it's really hard to do it in emulation, you could probably do it really good if you actually had like a physical copy of the game, although it would be in Japan or Japanese version. But overall, honestly, Mother 3 from start to finish does an amazing job. The story, although I don't want to spoil anything, is really good, especially like seeing the masked man being able to pull all 7 of those needles, seeing the development of the characters from chapter 4 to the end, as well as just the time skip. Like I said, you have Flint, who's constantly going back to his wife's grave, as well as looking for Claus, and that's constantly his character development until he finally finds Claus towards the end. This is actually probably a big spoiler, but yeah, it's really cool how you get to see the characters develop, and that's really the big thing of this game, as well as the story being very dark and the music really good, and it just also has really wacky and weird humor similar to Earthbound, which I think the reason why this game is a bit better than Earthbound is mainly because of its gameplay. And although Earthbound is still really good, I think this Mother 3 kind of improves everything that Earthbound did, improves the inventory system, allows you to run, making you improve on the pace as well as the speed, being able to kind of run through enemies and not having to deal with them, like showing the U1 screen and kind of showing you the experience. You can just run over enemies that are weaker than you, and it just gives you the experience and doesn't really bother you in the way that Earthbound kind of does a little bit. And it just overall is a more fast-paced game in my opinion than Earthbound is. I feel like Earthbound is a bit slower in the fact of its inventory system and its as well as its combat, as well as its just walking around the overworld. Mother 3 kind of just improves everything that Earthbound did, which is really hard to do, but somehow they did it. And like I said before, Earthbound's a really good game, but seeing that Mother 3 kind of improved everything Earthbound did in terms of gameplay, and although the stories are both really good, I think Mother 3 is just a little bit better, as well as its characters. And I think Lucas's character development is also a bit better than Ness's, which makes it just an overall just amazing experience, as well as just an overall amazing game. as there really isn't much wrong with it, and that's why it deserves its number spot at number 8. Number 7. Now, as a kid, I always loved the escape games like Escape the Telephone Booth, or Escape the Car, or Escape the whatever it may be. And those flash games I played, I really enjoyed them. I also, like I said before, I really enjoy stories, and when a game combines both kind of these escape rooms as well as a really, really good and engaging story with alternate routes and multiple different endings, it's a really good game, and that game is Zero Escape: Virtue's Last Reward. Now, this is a game slash series that not many people know about, as the Danganronpa series is kind of more well known. It's made by the same people, Spike Chunsoft, that make the Zero Escape series. And they made Zero Escape: Virtue's Last Reward, which is the second game, Zero Escape 999, which is 9 rooms, 9 doors, 9 people, and Zero Time Dilemma, which is a third and final game. And they're all really good in different ways, but I think Virtue's Last Reward is just the best out of the 3. And it's mainly because of its ending, as I think its ending is probably the best ending in any video game, and it's probably one of the best endings, if not the best ending in any video game, as it's really, really good. And I don't want to spoil anything, as it's a really good game to go in blind and to discover the story yourself, as it's just such an amazing story. And it's a visual novel like Danganronpa, except the gameplay segments, unlike the trial segments in Danganronpa, it's escape rooms, and the escape rooms are pretty well done, or at least most of them are. There are a few that were kind of iffy, but most of the escape rooms are really fun and have some really interesting puzzles, as well as just enjoyable, honestly. They also included these gold files that you could discover, which adds a little bit more replay value to these escape rooms. And it's overall just a really good gameplay aspect, honestly. The other gameplay aspect you have is decision making, as you could either decide to go through a certain escape room, as well as choosing whether to ally or betray, and your decisions have a different outcome of having a different route or having a different ending, as the game has 10 different endings, and each ending is based off of a character, which is really cool, and you get to kind of know more about that character with the different endings, as there's an ending for each character, and you really get to know that character better. It's also very unique, as it just flows so well, and there's also different routes that have dead ends to them, as not every route has an ending, and there's different dead ends and different game overs that you can get, but you get to discover more about certain things so that you're able to get certain endings. So you will have to get certain game over endings in order to learn more about the characters or about the place that you're stuck in, as you get to learn about it and use these morphogenetic fields, which pretty much allows you to transfer your consciousness to your past self. So everything that you learned before you died transfers to your past self, so you're able to get the different endings by figuring out how to solve these puzzles, because you're able to learn from your past self as your consciousness travels to your past self. It's really confusing, but it works really well, and because of that, it has this crazy different plot twist and endings. And like I said before, you get to learn about these characters by transferring your past self to your future self to your past self, and you're able to learn about these characters by your past self, and then able to use that to try and escape from the area that you're in. And it's really complicated, but it just works so well. And the ending, like I said, is one of the best endings of all time. The only thing bad about this game is that it's slow. There are times where, especially towards the middle, there really isn't much going on. It's a lot of recap, as there's a lot of different events that kind of overlap each other, or not really overlap, but are repeated in certain timelines. There's certain events that will happen no matter what timeline you're in, which kind of repeats itself and is a bit annoying. You can skip most of the dialogue that repeats, but some of it you can't. And there'll be times also where you're like traveling through the area and it's like a cutscene and it's really annoying, but it's just a time waster, honestly. But overall, Zero Escape, Virtue's Last Reward, really good. I don't want to spoil the story or anything because it's a game that you should go in blind, but if you do play it, you'll understand what I'm saying, and it's just overall one of my favorite visual novels. And like I said before, ending is one of the best endings of all time, and it's just a really, really good game. Number 6. Now, similar to Zero Escape, Virtue's Last Reward, number 6 is also a visual novel, and it's a visual novel that not many people know about, as it's like a hidden gem of the PS4, and in my opinion, it's my favorite PS4 game of all time, as it just has an amazing story, amazing cast of characters, and amazing gameplay. And that game is 13 Sentinels. Now, in my opinion, I think 13 Sentinels is pretty much an improvement on Octopath Traveler, as everything Octopath Traveler did wrong, 13 Sentinels does right, and yet so much more. Where Octopath Traveler is 8 separate stories of 8 different characters, not really having a common cause, and it's mainly just one main character going through a story and then 3 side characters in your party that don't really have the same common cause, and yet they're just there. There are some heart-to-hearts here and there, like I've said before in my Octopath Traveler segment, but it's not really, there's no relationship between these 8 characters too much. There is a little bit here and there, but it's not really developed as it is in 13 Sentinels, where 13 Sentinels is 13 different characters, and they all have a similar story to each other, which is like time traveling and defeating the kaiju being the main enemy of the game, as it's destroying the world pretty much. And all 13 characters are also really, really good, and they all have their different relationships, like Juro and Iori, or Iori and Ai have their own relationship, or Megumi and Juro, or Hijiyama and Ai, or not Ichiyama and Ai, Hijiyama and Keitaro, and Natsuno and Keitaro, and Tomi and Ogata. Like, they all have their own relationships, which are also really well developed and just really interesting as well. And it's really cool seeing the different characters interact with each other and fighting for a common cause, as even in the gameplay segments you see that. And it's really hard also to decide which character is your favorite, as all these characters are really good, and I still have trouble deciding which one is my favorite. Like, I really like Yuki, I really like Ai, I really like Ogata, I really like Togami, and I really like Shu. And all 5 of those characters, like if I were to make a top 10 favorite characters list, probably 5 of those characters, those 5, would probably be in that list, because all these characters are really, really good. And I love almost every single one of them, as they're just well developed, just very likable, love their personality, their style, their stance even, personality, I already said that, but the way they fight as well, their emotions, their backstory, they're all just really well developed, and each one of these characters are just so unique, and you get to see a different perspective, and you get to see the different relationships that they have, and it's just such an enjoyable game. And the game is split up into 3 segments. You have Destruction, which is your gameplay, which is like a tower defense, and you're in these Sentinels and you're defeating the kaiju, and it's really enjoyable as you get to improve on your skills, you get to learn new skills, whether they be passive or active, and you get to just destroy the kaiju, and there's just massive destruction, and you get to move them around, whether they be flying or on the ground, or whether they be long range, shooting with like missiles and stuff, or close range and they're like killing them with like chainsaws and stuff, or in the air where they're shooting up like mines and stuff, or shooting missiles as well and flying above the city. And it's just really fun and addicting, honestly. And the other thing about the gameplay too, which a lot of games don't do, once you go through the tutorial, you then choose your difficulty. Where a lot of games, you start up the game, you choose your difficulty, and yet you don't even know what you're getting yourself into. You don't know what gameplay you're getting into. But in this game, it shows you the tutorial, shows you how it's done, shows you how to play the game, and then it tells you what difficulty you want, which is amazing. And you can always change that difficulty as well, which a lot of other games do. But this game, I think, does better, where it shows you the game first, and then you get to choose the difficulty. And whatever difficulty you're doing, honestly, you're gonna have a lot of fun, and it's very satisfying as there's so much kaiju going on the screen, and you have these like giant hitboxes, especially the missiles that just destroy and wipe out like hundreds of kaiju. It's very satisfying. And then you have Remembrance, which is kind of the visual novel aspect of the game, where you're picking a character and seeing their side of the story and going through and seeing, discovering new information about the world, about what's going on, about the kaiju, and all this other stuff. And you get to see the relationships, like I said before, with the different characters, and as they kind of work together to find out more information or to defeat the kaiju. Because even in Destruction, there is some dialogue as well, as they talk to each other, and some of the stuff in Destruction is actually useful information for Remembrance, as there'll be walls where it'll be like on Remembrance, it'll say defeat wave 2 of level 2 in Destruction in order to continue the story, because you need that certain information, similar to Zero Escape, where it'll be like, oh, you need that certain information. It doesn't tell you what information, but you need that certain information for an ending. In this game, it'll say you need that certain information to continue playing this character's story, because you need that information first to understand the context of what you're getting yourself into, which is really good. And they also do that with other characters as well, where it's like you can't progress through Agata's story until you do Tomi's story or something like that, or you get a certain percentage of Tomi's story in order to continue Agata's story or something like that, which is just really well done. In the story, the characters are all just lovable and really interesting. There's a lot of different plot twists, which is also really cool. One of the most complex stories I've ever seen in any video game. It's very sci-fi, and a lot of stuff is going on, a lot of plot twists, but it's just really well done. Also, the art style is amazing. It's probably one of my favorite art styles of all time, as it doesn't get old. Like this art style that 13 Sentinels has will probably be timeless, as it's never going to be an art style that will get stale or will get enhanced from different consoles, as it's just beautiful, honestly. You also have the third part of the game, which is analysis, which is really just going through information that you already know, kind of just recapping yourself, which I didn't really use as much because I went through the game start to finish. Like I said before in my intro, these are games I could not put down, as the Remembrance part and the Destruction part were just so much fun and interesting to discover about the story, about the world of 13 Sentinels, that I just kept wanting to play it. The music is also really good in this game, especially for the Destruction part, as the gameplay music and the battle music is really, really good. The music for Remembrance is also good, as it kind of just fitting for the style, as a lot of it's just school stuff, and it kind of just fits the atmosphere. There's also some action segments as well that kind of has this fast-paced music, which is also really good. Overall though, 13 Sentinels is probably one of my favorite, like I said before, has some of my favorite characters in video games of all time, as well as just having this amazing story, multiple different plot twists, and probably one of my favorite stories of all time as well. And the gameplay, like I said before, I don't know whether I like the gameplay more or the story better, as the gameplay is also really, really fun. This is the first and only game on the PS4, as it's a hidden gem on the PS4, and it's probably my favorite game on the PS4, and it is my favorite game on the PS4, but it's the only PS4 game that I've ever platinumed, as I just kept playing it and wanting to complete every achievement. And although it took a while and I enjoyed playing it constantly, I just had such a fun time with this game, and probably replaying it, although it's very new, being I played this game back in December, if I played it again, I'd probably have just as much of a fun time and getting to learn these characters again, as some of them I have forgotten about, as there's so much information and so much story in this game and so much content that I would absolutely love playing it over and over again. Number 5. Now, it's sad to say that this game is the latest game in a series that should have another game out, but its last game was 2003, and It's its newest game, and that game is F-Zero GX. Now F-Zero GX is, like I said before, the latest F-Zero game, and it's sad to say because that was back in 2003, and yet it is such an amazing game. It has this adrenaline rush that literally no other game can really compare to, as you're going through these fast spaceship cars or whatever, and you're going through these crazy courses that are just so much fun to go through, and you just go through them with lightning fast speed, and it's just so much fun and so addicting, and it's my favorite racing game of all time because it just has this amazing risk reward system where your energy is also your boost meter, but only when lap 2 comes, and it's this risk reward where it's like, do I keep boosting and like have low health, or do I keep my boost so that I'm able to survive a hit if I do get hit, or if I hit into a wall, or if I or someone crashes into me or something like that, that I'm able to maintain that hit and keep going. And it's that risk reward system that really just makes this game so good, because it's like, do I speed up in front, or do I stay in the back and kind of play it safe? Because in this game you only have a certain amount of lives depending on which difficulty you go on, but with that difficulty you have a certain amount of lives until you retire, and if you lose all those lives then it's game over. And it's this really interesting concept where it's not like Mario Kart, where Mario Kart's kind of easy, where it's like, oh, if you fall off the stage you get saved by Lakitu. There's no Lakitu in this game, or at least in the Grand Prix, where if you fall off you retire and you have a certain amount of lives, similar to, I think, one of the Mario Karts, I think it was like Super Mario Kart or Super Circuit or something like that, where you have a certain amount of lives like that game, and if you lose all those lives you have to start the Grand Prix over again. And so falling off the course is literally a life, and if you fall off you die, or if you lose all your energy you die, and you have to know when to boost and when to maintain that boost. And there are heal pads, and you have to know where the heal pads are on every track. You need to know the fastest route for every track, and you need to know when to turn, when to not turn, when to do a hard turn, when to do a light turn, when to attack, when to not attack. And it's just, a lot of stuff is just going on, as there's 30 different racers, which compared to Mario Kart, which has 12, 12 is pretty chaotic. If you think that's chaotic, then you haven't seen F-Zero GX, where there's 30 different racers and they're all trying to kill you, they're all trying to get first place, and you might be in the back of the pack or you might be in the front of the pack, and either way you're gonna have a rough time. And it's going through that rough time, boosting through and trying to get that first place that just gives that adrenaline rush and gives that risk reward system that is just so good. Music is also really good. Every track has its own different soundtrack, or every track theme. Like there's Big Blue, and every Big Blue has that same song, but there's like Firefield songs, there's Mute City songs, there's a bunch of other ones that I can't name off the top of my head, but the music is really good and really fitting for the tracks, as well as fitting for the adrenaline rush as well. Difficulty is also really tough, but it's that toughness that kind of gives it play value, as you have to learn the game, learn the tracks, learn the characters as well, because each character has their different vehicle, and each vehicle has their different attributes. And there's also a ability where you can either choose, you want to do max speed or acceleration, or a little bit of both, or a little bit towards max speed or a little bit towards acceleration, and you get to decide that, which actually changes the factors. Unlike Mario Kart, where Mario Kart you kind of can change your cart and it'll change a little bit of your play style. F-Zero GX, if you choose a different character, it's almost completely different. Like Fat Shark is completely different than Blue Falcon, or Beastman, or Hyper Speeder, I think, is completely different than Astro Robin. And it just, all these different cars just adds to the replay value, as they all play differently. And the only thing that's wrong about this game is that there are cars that are overpowered, like Fat Shark and like Black Shadow's one, I forget its name, but there are cars like that that are super overpowered compared to the other cars. So the balancing isn't really there, but that's not really that big of a deal, especially when you're playing against AI, as they don't really know how to optimize it too well. So it's not really that big of a deal. But honestly, and if you're not counting that, F-Zero GX doesn't really have anything wrong with it. It also has a story mode, which is also really good. Introduces you how to kind of when to boost, when to like turn hard, when to not. Like I said before, when to attack, when to not. There's even a stage where you're attacking 30 different guys as you're going through like this bridge area, which is pretty cool. And there's even stages or tracks that are in the story mode that are not in the Grand Prix, which is pretty cool. And it's very difficult, and it's very rewarding when you actually get to beat those story mode levels. There's also cutscenes that have terrible voice acting, which is pretty funny, but they're not actually that bad in terms of, like, I guess adding to Captain Falcon's kind of I guess personality, as it can be goofy at sometimes, especially the intro videos to the drivers, as well, as they're all kind of kooky and wacky and weird, which kind of adds a little bit of a humor to F-Zero. And it's really sad to say that F-Zero GX is the newest F-Zero game, and I hope Nintendo makes a new one. But yeah, honestly, F-Zero GX is my favorite racing game, and it's a ton of fun, and it has this adrenaline rush and risk reward system that no other game has, and that's why it deserves its number spot at number 5. Number 4. Now, I first knew about this game from Super Smash Bros. And I'm glad I did, because this game is one of the best games of all time. And that game is Xenoblade Chronicles. Now, when I first saw Shulk in Smash 4, I'm like, who is this guy? And later on, doing research, I found out he's from this game called Xenoblade Chronicles, and I heard it's one of the best games of all time. And it's on the Wii, which is a console that I had at the time. So I got the game, and I played an hour through it, and kind of got bored, and I put the game down, and I didn't come back to it within like 6 months or something like that. Then after playing it, after this 6-month gap, I'm glad I did, because later on I get to kind of discover why this game is known to be one of the best games of all time, as it has an amazing story, amazing cast of characters, amazing protagonist being Shulk, amazing music, character development, lots of different content, and just an overall just vast world that is amazing, as the Bionis and Mechonis are both great locations with great environments and atmospheres, and it's just an amazing story, honestly. It has one of the best stories of all time. I don't want to spoil anything, but when I played that first hour, nothing really happened, but then I played an hour more, and I kind of got invested, as this game is one of those games where it leads you with questions, as like, what are these mechons? Why does that mechon have a face? What happened to so and so? I don't want to spoil anything. Why am I seeing these visions with the Monado? Why are there these arts of the Monado? How do I unlock them? What's going on? Like, there's a bunch of questions that this game kind of proposes to you, and you want to continue playing to discover the answers to those questions, as well as to see what Shulk does and what these other characters do. There's a lot of character development, like I said before, and it's really just an interesting game, and it's beautiful. Music, the environment, the characters, it all just comes together to make this amazing game. And especially with the definitive edition that came out on Switch, just made everything just a lot better, as the Wii graphics were a little bit iffy and not really the best looking. Definitive edition kind of improved everything on the graphics, as well as improving some gameplay aspects here and there. It really was an amazing remake, and I can't really go back to the Wii version, honestly, as everything the definitive edition did was just make the game even more beautiful than it already was. The only bad thing that I didn't really like about Xenoblade Chronicles was its side content, as It was a game that I played from start to finish. Like I've said before, with all these games, I played them from start to finish as I kept wondering. As more questions came up and questions got answered, more questions were brought up, and I kept wanting to play to discover the world of the Mechonis and the Bionis and the Mechonis. I can't speak, but anyway, I love just learning about that world, or the two titans, and to continue learning about the two worlds as well, or the two titans and their backstory and their history, as well as the Monado, as well as Shulk, as well as the adventures that they were going on. There were so many questions that were brought up, so many questions that got answered, and then more questions come up, and it constantly made me want to continue learning more and to answer all the questions that I had about what was going on, as there were so many different plot twists, so many different cool things to learn about. And like I said before, I don't want to spoil anything, unlike Sakurai, who spoiled some of the game throughout Smash Brothers, especially with Ultimate, spoiling even one of the biggest things, being his final Smash, even spoiling one of the characters, which is pretty sad, but I won't spoil anything here. Anyway, so I went through this game from start to finish. I absolutely loved it. The only thing that I didn't really like was its side content. The side quest really didn't motivate me to continue playing. I love the main quest. The side quests really didn't motivate me to do them, as I didn't really find them enjoyable. I didn't really find the side quests to be that entertaining or have that interesting of a story to it. And as well as rebuilding Colony 9, I didn't really find that interesting, as I didn't really feel like I was getting rewarded too well. And as well as the heart-to-hearts, all of the heart-to-hearts were really good. I didn't really find me having to grind Affinity to get those heart-to-hearts to be really that worth it. I do find the relationships between most of these characters really good. I didn't really find it entertaining to grind for Affinity to get those heart-to-hearts. And although all these characters are really good, there are some characters that throughout the game, or towards the end, really aren't really have an important role anymore. Like Dunban, once you get to the end of the game, he's not really that important. Charla, same thing. Ricky, same thing. They're kind of just there. They're not really a main part of the story anymore. They're just there to help Shulk out, really. And I didn't really like that too much, but it made sense, and they do have their own, they still have their own voice lines and stuff like that, and they do contribute in conversations and everything like that. It's just they don't really have a main part in the story, which I didn't really like too much, but I understood it. And honestly, overall, Xenoblade Chronicles has an amazing story, one of the best stories of all time, great soundtrack, one of the best protagonists of all time, great character development, and just lots of content, as it's a long game and there are so many things to do, so many places to discover, so many enemies to defeat. And although I didn't really like the gameplay too much, as it was really just repetitive, I'm on the side of the enemies, side slash, I'm behind the enemy, backslash. But I did like how every character kind of played different and had their own arts, which was fun to play, each character and everything like that. It was still kind of just repetitive and a little bit boring on the boring side, although you did learn new arts throughout the game and throughout leveling up, which was pretty cool. It still kind of felt a little bit repetitive. But overall though, Xenoblade Chronicles is one of my favorite games of all time. I absolutely love it, and I recommend it to really anyone. Number 3. Now this is a very powerful game, as it's a game in my opinion that really changed me and changed my view of the world, as well as just how I act as a person, as well as how I treat other people as well. And that game is The World Ends With You. Now The World Ends With You is a very, very good game. Has an amazing story that has changed multiple people, not just me, but other people as well. It changed their view on the world, the view on other people, and it's a very powerful game in its story, as its main protagonist Neku changes from this shutout who wears his headphones, ignoring everyone, thinks he can do everything by himself, and kind of just doesn't care about people and doesn't really like people. And the character development of other characters are also really good. The gameplay is also really fun, as well as you're controlling Neku on the touchscreen and you're controlling your partner with the D-pad, which is on the top screen, and you're acting as a team to fight a common enemy and to defeat the noise, and your partner is attacking the same enemy as Neku is on the bottom screen, and you're working together. And it's a lot of multitasking, as you have to kind of know how to attack on the top screen as well as knowing how to attack on the bottom screen. And it works so well. I absolutely love the gameplay of that aspect of this multitasking and of this teamwork. Even though it's a single player game, you're controlling both characters, one being on the top screen, one being on the bottom screen, one with the D-pad, one with the stylus. It's amazing. The music is also really good and really fitting, as you're in Shibuya, and it's actually based off of real life Shibuya, which is really good. And it has this music of like this city vibe and of like this pop rock kind of music, really fitting, and I absolutely love the soundtrack of this game. The environment is also really good. Like I said before, the music and the environment of Shibuya just combine so well, and it makes this amazing world that you're in. And it's real life Shibuya, and it's even based off of Shibuya, like I said. And the reason this game kind of changed me was because I kind of felt like I was Neku. At times I would just ignore people, I would kind of shut myself in, play on my DS honestly, and just kind of just shut out people, thought I could do everything myself. And then later on, after I played this game, and after I kind of discovered that, oh, maybe I do like people, like just like Neku does, like maybe I do like working with people, maybe I do need to work as a team. And when I discovered that right amount of people, or those right people, that right friend group, like I actually felt like Neku, and I felt like maybe I do like people, maybe I do like working as a team, and finding that right synergy, I guess you could say, of those right people like Neku did, finding Shiki and Beat and Rhyme and Joshua. When he found those right people that he kind of enjoyed working with, or enjoyed like talking with and hanging out with, really, I kind of felt the same way when I found the right people that I liked hanging out with and still hang out with. And it was really from this game that I kind of discovered how I don't really rely on people, but like how working as a team can be better than just working alone, as I used to love just working alone and accomplishing things by myself. But working as a team, you kind of have that and more. You're working as a team, you're enjoying your company with other people, and you're accomplishing things together, which in the Worlds with You, Neku and Joshua and Beat and Shiki and Rhyme, Neku discovers that with those characters. And each one of those characters are really good and really well developed. They all have their own unique backstory, and it's just amazing. And the game is split up into 3 weeks. Week 1 is with Shiki, week 2 is with Joshua, and week 3 is with Beat. Not to really spoil anything, but those are your other partners throughout the week. And each week there is a different entry fee, which is also really interesting. And I love how they had that aspect where Neo really doesn't have that, being its sequel. And Neo kind of is a sequel to this game, and it really just focuses though on these characters, as though the main characters of those games don't really exist, which is kind of bad. But Neo was pretty cool in showing kind of the future of these characters, and showing how it is 3 years later from this game, as you get to see your favorite characters from this game into the other game. But it, like I said before, kind of ignores the new main protagonist of the of Neo. But anyway, going back to the Worlds with You, the original, it also has an amazing cast of villains as well, being the Reapers, and I forget the names, but I know their nicknames from Beat, being Candyman, Pinky, and the Math Man. I forget his name already, but the guy who says Zeta Slow, and I should know his name because he's in Neo as well. But I absolutely love all three of those characters, as you have Candyman, who's like this calm, chill Reaper. You have Pinky, who is this like very competitive Reaper who wants to destroy everything, or like get a raise in her job, as she just does her job so well. And then you have Zeta, I'm just gonna call him, who's just like this math nerd and just like kind of shits on everyone, honestly, and is on this like pile of trash yelling from a megaphone. He's just such a lovable villain, and I love that. And honestly, yeah, the other Reapers are good as well, although not as memorable. They're also really good villains, and I love the villain cast, or the Reaper cast, as well. I love just discovering things, as well as the game has multiple different plot twists, multiple different just information that you get, and it's just overall a really good story and really well developed, as the characters are really good, character development is really good. The only really bad thing is that it gets repetitive at times, not as repetitive as Neo, where Neo felt like you were constantly just doing the same thing over and over again. So just a lot of just different quests that didn't really add to the character development. The ones with you kind of had a lot of different side stories or mini stories that kind of added to the character development of those characters at that week and at that time. And it's overall just an amazing game, and a lot of people call it a modern classic, as it's just, like I said before, amazing story, amazing characters, amazing character development, amazing gameplay, and amazing music, and that's why it deserves its spot at number 3. Number 2. Now, number 2 is my favorite visual novel of all time, as it constantly had me laughing, has amazing characters, amazing story, and multiple different endings and route, and also really unique gameplay. And that game is AI, the Somnium Files. Now, similar to Zero Escape Virtue's Last Reward, AI, the Somnium Files is also made by Spike Chunsoft. And Spike Chunsoft has made other great games, like you saw before with Danganronpa V3. They make amazing visual novels, and AI is no exception, as it is just an amazing visual novel, as it constantly had me laughing, as it's a really, really funny visual novel. And it also has a really good story, great cast of characters, multiple different endings and routes, amazing soundtrack as well. The gameplay is also really cool and unique, and you have this time management system with the gameplay that is also really cool. And the gameplay is pretty much you're going inside these people's heads or brains, and you get to see their perspective, as you get to see even perspective of people with mental illness. And it's really cool how you get to see how they view the world, or how they view the situation or the event, and you get to learn from that character, going into their mind to discover the mystery, or the murder mystery of Mizuki's mother. I forgot her name, but that was the main plot, I guess you could say, as in the first 10 minutes you get to see Mizuki's mother dead on a carousel. And it's really interesting, as even though it's hard to kind of take the game seriously because it has so many funny moments, if you do take it serious at times and funny at other times, it's a really, really good game. As, like I said before, this is one of the few games that really had me laughing out loud of just how funny it is. You have these funny characters like Date, like Aiba, like Tessa, like Moma, like Mama. There are so many funny characters, and they're just so good. And my favorite character, Mizuki, also has really good character development, and is the main character for the sequel, which I'm really hyped up for, as she just had so much character development. She was really funny, she was really cool and super strong, and just like really like pissy and bitchy, at first, but deep down she's like this softie, and she was just an amazing character, and I absolutely loved her. And her and Date's relationship was also really well done, as well as Date and Tessa, as well as Moma and Date, and Mama and Date. Their relationships are also really funny. As you have Moma, who's this Yakuza gang leader, and all he wants to do is shake Tessa's hand, as well as just this big Tessa fan, who Tessa's just like this e-girl. And then you have Ota, who's like this simp, who's simping for Tessa. And it's all just like so like aware. It's self-aware of what the events are going on. As this game came out in 2019, it's so self-aware of how the world is, and I think that's the funniest part about this game, as it just makes fun of pretty much everything, and I just love it. It's humor is just so funny, so cool, and even like the decisions that you can make of like dialogue are also really funny. Like when you first discover Ota, like there's an option to punch him, to kick him. It's like because you absolutely just hate this character. Although he is a little bit better when you get to learn him later on. Some of his backstory is a little bit interesting, and is a little bit like, I guess, sad, but it's hard to kind of like him because of just how hateable he is, because he's just this terrible simp and no one really likes him, honestly. But anyway, this game is amazing. I absolutely love its story. Like I said, it's a murder mystery, and at times when it is serious and you're discovering what is going on, you're a detective, Date, and you're finding out what's happening, what's going on. Like I said before, you can go into other people's brains through this machine that allows you to see the perspective of those characters, to kind of get a better grasp of what the situation is, and to discover who this Cyclops killer is. And it's honestly really interesting. A lot of different plot twists go on, and like I said before, it's probably one of my favorite characters of all time. Mizuki has this amazing character development. She's this almighty and powerful 12-year-old girl who just has this amazing character development, especially when you Mizuki actually goes into Date's head. Not going to spoil anything, but it's very touching, and it almost made me cry at that point, as it is very heartwarming. But overall, though, AI is an amazing visual novel. Although there isn't much gameplay to it, as the gameplay is really just you're controlling Aiba, who's like this eyeball in your, or AI eyeball, which is a prosthetic, and you control her through this space of some other person's mind, and you go around. You have, I think, 6 minutes to complete your task of finding what it is you need to find, and there's multiple different routes that you can go down, as some of those segments there are branching paths that will give you different endings, and that also gives you more information to discover the different routes, as there'll be parts where it'll be like, oh, to be continued, you need to go down a different route in order to get the information you need, in order to in order to complete that path, which isn't really explained like it is in Zero Escape, where it's like morphogenetic fields and you get to know that information. It's just kind of there, I guess you could say. But yeah, you do have branching paths. You do have multiple different endings, which are also really cool. There's even an ending which is not really a real ending, but like a fake ending, which is the receptionist ending, where there's this character called a receptionist that has really big titties, and there's this one part where you can literally just say, let's ditch this like murder mystery and just go out to the city, and that's just an ending that you just literally leave the investigation to hang out with this receptionist with big tits and just go out with her. And it's just like so funny and so ridiculous that there's all these stupid and weird interactions like that. And like other times, like there'll be parts where you have like x-ray vision with your prosthetic eyeball, because she's also AI, and you get to like see this waiter with like nice hips because he just all he's like looking at is her hips, and then he puts on the X-ray vision. He's like, she's got some nice hips. It's like stupid and funny stuff like that in the game that I just love. Anyway, going back to the gameplay though. So yeah, there's multiple different branching pathways, but it's all every action that you do is time consuming, and it's a different time consuming thing. There's also these little like chips that you can get to either half your time or to make the time a certain amount. If it's like too long or too or like you want to save time because you only have 6 minutes in that headspace. And it's a lot of weird and wacky things that can happen in that timer, in that area of headspace, as you get to discover what that person is seeing. And it's very interesting, as well as, like I said before, the branching paths and how it can change what you discover and what you find with those branching paths to kind of change how the endings happen. As there's even a branching path right in the beginning of the game with the first time you go in Mizuki's head and you get to branch off at the first gameplay segment, which is pretty cool. But overall, like I said before, AI has an amazing story, amazing humor, amazing characters, amazing character development, multiple different endings, routes, music, gameplay, the time management system. Like I said before, only bad thing is really it tries to be serious, though there are so many funny moments. It's kind of hard to take it serious at times. But other than that, it's an amazing game. Number 1. Well, here we are, the number 1 spot. Now, this was a hard decision to make, and there are so many great games out there and so many great games that I've played and beaten. But the number 1 pick, in my opinion, and a lot of other people's opinions, as you guys will probably even see when I announce the number 1 pick, is very controversial, as a lot of people think that this game is bad, and then there's a lot of people that think it's really good, as it's a very hit or miss game. For the people that it miss, it's like people are like, oh, the original is better. Oh, this game is way too anime. Oh, this game isn't good. Or, oh, this game is actually bad. But for the ones that it hits hard. And I know I'm not the only one out there to say it, that it's my favorite game of all time. And I know I'm not the only one where it hits really hard, as this game is like an emotional roller coaster. And it's a very powerful game once you actually get into it and you play it from start to finish, as I know a lot of people drop this game because it does have kind of a slow start, as there are chapters that are not that good. But anyway, my number 1 pick is Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Now, like I said before, Xenoblade Chronicles 2, a lot of people don't really like, and people say, oh, the original is better. I honestly think that Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is the best game of all time, and it's mainly because of its emotional roller coaster, as well as it being probably the first game that made me cry, especially at the beginning of Chapter 7 made me cry, because I could just relate to Rex more than I could, I guess, with Shulk, as Rex was treated as this kid, as this as all the adults kind of were like, no, you can't do this, you're just a kid. And it's similar to Ocarina of Time, where you're kind of treated differently as a kid than you are as an adult. And Rex, although not the best protagonist, it kind of makes sense because he's this kid, because he's kind of this ignorant kid and not really knowing much about the world because of his young age, and because he's kind of just treated as a kid, of the fact that he's kind of relatable in a sense. But anyway, that's kind of my rant about Rex a little bit. Let's get into Xenoblade Chronicles 2. The reason I think Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is the best game is mainly because of its story, gameplay, characters, music, character development, humor, blade quest, blades in general, the DLC, the backstories, and like I said before, being this emotional roller coaster. The only bad parts about this game is Rex being the protagonist, is he's not the best protagonist, but he is kind of relatable, and he does get a good amount of character development. Not really like where at first he relies on Pyra and this almighty and powerful blade. He then realizes that he's kind of abusing her power and that he can fight without Pyra and to fight as a team instead of just relying on her. And like I said before, there are some chapters that are a bit boring, especially towards the beginning. Chapters like 2 and 4, although they're not the best chapters, and I understand why they're there. They kind of have a little bit of character development, a little bit of new stuff, and not that much action though. They are still decent chapters, but just not as good as the other chapters, like chapters 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, which are all really good. And similar to Xenoblade Chronicles 1, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 has a really good story. And there's, like I said before, there's a lot of questions that come up, like especially in chapter 1, who's this dragon Azerta who is my Gramps, since like how does he know Jin and Malos? Who is Malos? What is Torna? What is why is Nia with Malos and Jin, but now she's with me, and why aren't they giving me information about these characters? But then you get to discover kind of yourself, and it's really just interesting of how each one of these characters you get to discover and get to know their backstory, as even their backstory is DLC, where Torna is part of Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and I think its DLC is really good. Being Torna, you get to learn about Jin, you get to learn about Malice, you get to learn about Adam, which is Mithra / Pyra's previous owner. You get to learn about other characters and other blades as well, like Brigid and Haze, as well as these other characters that are in Torna. That it's really interesting knowing about their backstory at first, and then also discovering how they act in the original, being Xenoblade Chronicles 2. And like I said before, going back to Xenoblade Chronicles 2, you even see flashbacks and mentions of the previous events that happened in Torna, and how Torna being a Titan, how it fell, and what happened, and then being able to actually see those events fold out and getting to learn more about the world of Xenoblade Chronicles 2, being the fallen Titan Torna. It's really interesting, and I absolutely love the world, or the Cloud Sea of Xenoblade Chronicles 2, as each Titan is completely different, having their own different theme, so much things to discover. As I feel like with Xenoblade Chronicles 2, I liked how there was multiple different Titans. I liked how I felt like there's more exploration, as the blades that you get in this game have their own abilities that you can use to discover new things, like treasure chests, or discover new areas or stuff like that, which I felt like increased the exploration that really Xenoblade Chronicles didn't have, as you couldn't really use any like blade things, or you couldn't really use any abilities to discover new places. It was just run and jump. But with this game, you could use blade abilities to get to new areas that you haven't discovered yet, which I felt like increased its its exploration, which was really cool. I also like the side content of this game. Unlike Xenoblade Chronicles, where it had a lot of side content, I didn't really enjoy it. Where Xenoblade Chronicles 2 had these blade quests where most of the rare blades had their own blade quest, which even the DLC also had their own blade quest, which had their own cutscenes as well as story. And you get to learn about these blades, which is really cool, and I really enjoyed that because of the fact that these rare blades all had their own different personalities. They all had their own different designs, voice actors, weapons, and it was really cool how they had also their own different arts, and each character, depending on which character / driver that you used, had different arts to it. So there were so many different combinations that you could do with driver and blade, whether it be rare blade or even just the normal regular blades that you can get from the core crystals, there were so many different gameplay things that you could do in this game that wasn't in Xenoblade Chronicles 1. And I think the gameplay in Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is a lot better than Xenoblade Chronicles 1, especially how you have blade combos and driver combos, and you can switch between 3 different blades, as well as just having these unique arts that have their own different like status effects and stuff like that. Although Xenoblade Chronicles 1 had that as well, I feel like Xenoblade Chronicles 2 kind of just enhanced that. Also, every blade has their own kind of I guess skill chart, as well as every driver has their own skill chart as well, which requires SP. And it's all just comes together to be just this really kind of grindy, I guess, not really grindy, but like satisfying gameplay as you collect rare blades, you discover new blade combos or driver combos, or I guess driver combos just break, topple, launch, smash, which does get repetitive here and there, similar to Xenoblade Chronicles, but it's knowing it's doing that, but also combining it with blade combos to extend the blade combo, which is really cool, and I absolutely love that. So the gameplay of Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is really good. The story, like I said before, it's really good. A lot of plot twists, a lot of there's some funny moments, but it's really just an emotional roller coaster. There are happy times, there are sad times, there are funny times, there are dramatic times, there's action times, there's these rough times, there are sweet times. It's just all over the place, and I kind of like that, as that's how life is. Life isn't all about happy times, it's not all about sad times, it's a combination of both, and Xenoblade Chronicles 2 really just does that so well, especially towards the end, and it's just an amazing experience from start to end, as even though the start is a little bit slow, the ending is just so much more satisfying because of the start being very slow. And like I said before, even with Torna, although I think Torna might be a little bit better of its pacing, it's a little bit shorter, and because of that, and it's just very entertaining all the way through, except for I think getting the community to level 5, which was a bit annoying. But other than that, really fun. I also love the DLC. DLC I think made things fresh, had like a new rare blade every like few months or so. Added some new side quests, which were pretty decent. Although I didn't really like the side quests similar to Xenoblade Chronicles 1, I really liked the blade quests, and the blade quests were a lot of fun. Discovering these blades and seeing their personalities and seeing how they are and how they act was really cool. And unlike Xenoblade Chronicles 1, Xenoblade Chronicles 2, every character had an important role from start to finish, in my opinion. You had Rex, who was the main protagonist, who was this ignorant kid who just was like kind of stubborn and relied on Pyra's power, to then this heroic kid who kind of turned into an adult and didn't rely on Pyra and worked with her as a team, but then even learned to let her go at that time. Not going to spoil anything, but yeah. You have Pyra, who is this amazing protagonist who's lovable and just also very powerful blade, with her other side being Mithra, and that kind of combination slash chemistry of just Pyra Mithra is also really cool, and I love that. You have other characters like Nia, who's this like side hoe, I guess you could say. She gets friend zoned, but she's really lovable, and just she's also just like kind of, I guess, is a little bit bitchy towards Rex, where she kind of tries to make him more of an adult and like calls him a child every time he does something like immature or something that isn't I guess heroic or adult like. You have who else? Stromark wasn't really that much of a main character, but he's kind of just there for Nia, and I understand. But you have Tora, who's this Nopon that can't use blades and is just uses artificial blades that he made himself, but looks up to Rex because he is this almighty and powerful master blade or Master Driver, I should say, as he has the Aegis being Pyramithra, and can later on use any blade that he wants, which Tora looks up to and is just kind of just like Rex is his role model, which is pretty interesting. And you have his blade, Poppy, who kind of supports Tora and is the artificial blade of Tora, and is this interesting character to say the least, but is very, very heartwarming, especially towards the end with Poppy and Mithra slash Pyra's relationship. Then you have Zeke, who's this really funny guy, and I absolutely love him. Zeke von Gembu, or whatever his last name is. Him and Pandoria are this this drastic duo that at first are like trying to kidnap the Aegis for themselves, but are just so funny. They're like Team Rocket, where they're just like, they literally even blast off again, and it's so funny, the interactions with them. But then he finally just joins forces with them, which is pretty cool, as he's a funny and lovable character, and he even says, "I'm really feeling it," like Shulk, which is pretty funny. Then you have Morag, who is probably the most normal character of the group, and is kind of like the mom figure of the group, and is the most mature, as she's there just being a mature figure to Rex, and is kind of a little bit of a role model to Rex, as she is this sister of the Emperor of Morardane, which is really cool. And her blade, Bridget, has a backstory in Torna, and is more, I guess, has more character development in Torna, and she keeps her memories in like a little notebook, because when a blade dies, she or he or she loses all their memories, which is also a really cool concept to have, as there are blade eaters, and there's also I forget the other name of the other thing that you can do, but there's a lot of interesting concepts and things in Xenoblade Chronicles 2 that just makes the story even better than it should be, honestly, where there's so many different plot twists of different mechanics and stuff like that that are shown throughout the game, and kind of explained, and even explained in Torna as well, that makes the game and characters so much more interesting, as it's overall just an amazing game. Like I said before, this emotional roller coaster. Music is also really good. There's so many different tracks. I even have my own playlist of just songs from Xenoblade Chronicles 2. You have songs like Morardane, One Last Time with You, Crossing Swords, and so much more that I can't think off the top of my head. Tantal, Gormat's theme from Torna, or battle theme from Torna, or just the battle theme in general. They're all really, really good. DLC also adds this like challenge center, which is also really good and fun, which you can get different unlocks like Shulk and Fiora. And then you can also get Elma as well, which is also kind of like a fan service type of thing, but it's really cool to have them in the game as well. And you can even see Rex and Shulk shaking hands, which is pretty weird to see, but it makes sense, because I don't want to spoil anything, but Xenoblade Chronicles 2 and Xenoblade Chronicles 1 are connected just by a little bit. It makes sense when you play it, and it's really cool when you first see it, as you even see a cutscene from Xenoblade Chronicles 1 without it being explained, and then you kind of understand later on, and it's just this really cool like part of the game where it's like, what the hell is going on? And it's such an amazing feeling that you get, especially those end chapters, because I think it's at the end of chapter 7 that you see that Xenoblade Chronicles 1 cutscene, and then you get to see it, more of it, I think, in chapter 10 or chapter 9. I think it's the beginning of chapter 10. I could be wrong though, but it's honestly amazing how it shows how the games connect, and who you get to discover who the I can't think of the name right now, but the artifact or artifice, I forget what his name is, or I know his name, but I don't want to spoil it, but the his code name, I guess you could say, as you get to discover who he is. And it honestly is amazing how the two games connect in this game. And overall, like I said before, I understand why a lot of people don't like this game, as like I said before, it's slow in the beginning. There are some segments that are like anime type. There are uh, some parts that are a bit iffy, but especially it's all worth it honestly once you get towards the end. Like chapter 1's really good, chapter 3 is really good, chapter 5 is pretty good, and then chapter 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all really really good chapters, and it's just such an amazing game. I recommend it to anyone, but like I said, it's not for everyone, and I'm not alone when I say this, that it was the first and so far only game to really make me cry. And because of it being so powerful of this emotional roller coaster, it deserved a spot at #1 in my opinion. And I know I'm not alone when I say that, as I've seen people in the comments of Xenoblade Chronicles 2 videos saying how it kind of changed their life and how it was such a powerful game for them. And for me, I can say it's the same thing. And that's why it deserves its spot at #1. So that is going to be it for today, guys. I thank you guys all for watching. And if you watched my entire series, I really thank you, as it was a very long process for me to make this series, as it was 10 different videos that took multiple different hours to make and create and edit and all that stuff. And it was definitely a journey, and it was really fun for me to make and to rank these 100 different games I absolutely love and adore. And I hope you guys enjoyed as well watching. And let me know what you guys think in the comments below of some of your opinions of my top 100 games list, or of your own top 100 games list you can put in the comments. And I love to see them if you guys have any. But anyway, again, I thank you guys for watching, for staying with me. On the Nick, and stay tuned for other things and other videos that hopefully I'll put out something. I don't know. Maybe I'll go back to Mario Kart or something. I don't really know. Depends on what you guys want me to do. I'm honestly down for anything. I might do No More Heroes 3 Let's Play, but it depends on what you guys want. So let me know about that in the comments as well, since we're all done with the top 100 games list. And I thank you, and I thank you for being with me on this journey of my top 100 games list. But until then, stay tuned for other videos right here on Nick.